Welcome students again to another session. I greet you all. I hope you're well rested for another session about the pronouns that we're talking about. But in this case, we introduced the idea of relative pronouns, but now we said that they introduce relative clauses, and now in those relative clauses, we said that they are of two types. We mentioned that the relative pronoun introduces the relative clause. So the relative clause is of two types. They are of two types. The first one is a defining relative clause. The second one is a non-defining relative clause. Okay, so they are of two types. These relative clauses that are introduced by relative pronouns are of two types. We have non-defining, we have defining relative clauses and non-defining relative clauses. So we're going to begin with the defining relative clauses. The defining relative clauses. So they are also referred to as the restrictive relative clause. This defining relative clause, they are also referred to a restrictive relative clause, where it is an essential clause whereby without it some information will be missing. Okay, so this non-defining relative clause, okay, is an essential clause whereby without it some information will be missing. Okay, information about the noun will be missing. So, for example, the students who are supposed to be given permission to go to hospital are here. Hospital are here. The students who are supposed to be given permission to go to hospital are here. So again, remember we say that relative pronouns introduce relative clauses. Relative clauses give us information about the noun in the sentence. So here, the noun is the students. So who are supposed to be given permission to go to hospital is the relative clause. So why are we calling it restrictive? We are calling it restrictive in the sense. So we say it is restrictive in the sense that it restricts the larger group, whereby the students are the larger group. But only those who were supposed to be given permission is what we are restricted to. Okay, we are only restricted to those ones that are supposed to be given permission. The larger group would be the students, but now it restricts it particularizes. Okay, it particularizes the larger group. Okay, which one in particular? Which students in particular? The ones that were supposed to be given permission. All right, so it's an essential clause whereby if you leave that information out, then something will be missing. Okay, something will be not clear. So we need it so that the sentence makes sense. All right, now we have the non-restrictive now. The non-restrictive. The non-defining relative clause. Okay, it is also referred to as the non-restrictive relative clause. Okay, so such a clause, it just gives additional information. Okay, it gives additional information about the noun that precedes it. That is, it gives us more information about the noun that comes before the relative clause, such that if left out, the meaning will still nothing will be interfered with. If left out, the sentence will still make sense. Okay, if you leave that part, the non-defining relative clause, if you leave it out, it will make sense. And we've also said that it gives additional information about the noun that it precedes it. Let me give you an example. Maundu, who plays football, is very talented. So this sentence here, this clause here, who plays football, is our non-restricted. Why? If we leave it out, okay, the information is still the same. So another thing we need to note, the noun is presumed to be known. Hence, no need for more information. Okay, the noun is presumed to be known, hence no need for more information. So that's why we call it it gives us additional information. We already know who Maundu is. But now with the other one, with the students, we don't know which ones. So that's why it is something that you can't leave out. If you leave it out, then we won't know which students we're talking about. But here, if you leave out, we know Maundu, the Maundu you're talking about. We already know them. We already know him or her. So we don't need to add what? There, we can leave it out, or we can again add it. So it just acts as additional information. Remember, we said that restrictive is it's an essential clause whereby without which, okay, the information will not make sense. Some information will be missing. But now there is an unrestrictive one. It is not restrictive to a particular person. You already know the person you're talking about. You're just adding more information about this person or that person. All right. Now, another thing about the non-restrictive, it is separated. Okay. It is separated from the rest of the sentence by use of commas. So the non-restrictive relative clause is normally separated from the rest of the sentence by use of what? Commas. In this case, it can be left out. Whenever a comma is used, whenever two commas are used, it means that the information that is between it, okay, between those two commas can be left out. Because normally commas are used as brackets. They can also be used, they are called parentheses in punctuation, whereby the dashes, the brackets, and the commas, the two commas used together are used as what? Brackets. So in this case, they are used together because now the information can be left out. It can be either there or not. It is just something that you can choose. It's optional. You can leave it out or you can leave it there. All right. So those are the different types of the non-defining and the defining relative clause. Remember, we say that the relative clause is a clause that is introduced by a relative pronoun, and it is of two. The relative pronouns are of 5 types. We have who, whom, whose, that, which. Okay, and when they introduce the relative clause, the function of that relative clause is to give us more information about the noun that the clause comes after. Okay, or the noun that precedes it. The noun that comes before the relative clause. It gives us more information so that it acts as an adjective. The relative clause is acting as an adjective. So in this case, we also said that there are 2 types. We have the defining relative clause, or restrictive, because it restricts members of a larger group, okay, and the non-defining or non-restrictive relative clause, because it is not restricted to a particular group, because now we already know the person who, or the people who you've already mentioned in the sentence. All right, so that will be all. I want to give you an assignment for the same, so that you can look at how you'll be able to do it. Now, in an exam, before I give you the exercise, in an exam, you can be given 2 sentences. Okay, so in both sentences, they're just the same. The only difference is that the sentence A is the restrictive. Okay, let me just put in bracket, restrictive. Okay, and then sentence B, all right, is non-restrictive, or we can say non-defining. Okay, the teacher who is neatly dressed is from Kisumu, and the teacher who is neatly dressed comma is from Kisumu. Remember the 2 commas. So in this case, you can be asked to give the difference. What is the difference between the 2? So in this case, the information that is here is essential. We don't know the teacher that you're talking about. The teachers are many, but the only one who is dressed in what? In neatly is now the one from is from Kisumu. But in the second sentence, the teacher, we already know who the teacher is. Okay, so the who is neatly dressed is just additional information. So it's only one teacher who is neat, but now we already know the teacher who is neat. We already know the teacher who is neat, but now we already know the teacher from Kisumu. But now the information that is who is neatly dressed is just additional. But now in the first one, who is neatly dressed, it specifies us, it particularizes, it restricts, it tells us which there are many teachers, but the one who is neatly dressed. In the second sentence again, we know that the teacher who is from Kisumu. So who is neatly dressed is just an additional information. Okay, so in case you're given it in an exam, you find such an example in an exam, you can just find the 2 sentences and then you're told, give the difference in meaning. That is what you'll say. One, we already know there are many teachers, but the one who is neatly dressed is from Kisumu. In the second one, we already know the teacher from Kisumu, but now we are just adding more information that she is neatly dressed. All right, now let me give you one more exercise before we finish. Identify whether the relative clause in the sentences below are defining or non-defining. First, you identify the relative clause and state whether it is defining and or non-defining. London, which is the capital of England, is one of the largest cities in the world. Number 2, this is the dress that my mother has made for me. Number 3, Queen Elizabeth II, who is 83, has been the Queen of England for 57 years. Number 4, this is the officer that arrested the burglar. Number 5, the dog that beat me has been killed. Number 6, Greg, whose job involves traveling a lot, has been in nearly all the countries in the world. All right, so I want you to identify the relative clause and state whether it is defining or non-defining. So you'll underline it and then you do what? You state whether it is defining or non-defining. That said, we have come to the end of our session. And remember, we said that relative pronoun, it was all about relative pronouns. But we went ahead and saw that the relative pronoun introduces relative clauses. Although these relative clauses are of two types. The relative clauses are of two types, such that we have the non-defining, which is also called restrictive, and the defining one, which is also called the defining one, which is also called restrictive, and the non-defining one, which is also called non-restrictive. In the restrictive one, it is essential in that the information given about the noun is essential. You can't you can't miss it out, because when you omit it, the sentence does not make sense. But in the defining one, the information is not essential. You can still leave it out and the sentence still makes sense. We already know the noun that you're talking about. So the information that is given there is normally additional information. And remember, it is separated from the rest of the sentence with a comma. But in the non-defining one, there are no commas, meaning the information is essential. So where commas are there, the information is not essential. It is just additional. But where there are commas, where there are no commas, it means that the information is very necessary. Hence, the no need of what? Commas. Again, when we say restrictive, it means it restricts members of a larger group. Okay, such that if you're talking about students, which students? So you restrict it. But now if you just say the students and then you put a comma, it means we already know the students you're talking about. So we're just adding additional information. All right. That said, we have come to the end of the lesson. Have a wonderful moment.